where I'm actually here with a very special guest, Annabelle Gawer. Is that how you say it's Gawer? Gawer. She's coming from the University of Surrey. She's a professor there, and she understands technology platforms. And maybe we'll just jump into this. And well, this is all very relaxed. And the idea is behind the Reciprocity Project is essentially to normalize a lot of the stuff that we go through to make other people feel okay. So let's just jump into this, just have a conversation. And yeah, I'm just curious to see who you are and what have you been up to?
Thank you, David. So I'm a professor in digital economy in the UK at the University of Surrey. I'm the director of a center called the Center of Digital Economy. We have 35 members, academic colleagues, postdocs, doctoral students from a variety of disciplines, and they are all examining different facets of the digital economy. So from strategy, business models of firms, to organizations, information systems aspect, power aspect of digital platforms. And so, yeah, I've been working in this area of digital platforms and ecosystems for about 25 years since my PhD.
Oh, so tell me, when did you start your PhD then, or where did you go?
I was at MIT.
Okay.
During my PhD at MIT, the Sloan School of Management, and I started in September 1994, and I graduated in 2000.
Okay, and then who did you work with there?
My main supervisor is Michael Cusumano.
Oh, yeah.
With whom I continue to publish, and he's a dear friend as well as a long-time co-author. The other two wonderful members on my thesis committee were Scott Stern and Rebecca Henderson.
Oh, very cool. That was an absolute privilege. And so are you American then? And now you live
No, I am French and British. So
okay.
I was born in France and lived there from Paris, lived there until I was 21 years old. Then I went to Stanford. So I spent a year and a half there, went back to France for a few years, and then went back to the US for 5 years for my PhD.
Yeah.
And then went back to France and worked at INSEAD for a few years as an assistant professor. Married an Englishman, moved to the UK, where I was faculty at Imperial College Business School. We've had 3 children, and I became British a few years ago, and I've been now at the University of Surrey since 2016.
That's amazing. You've had such a busy life. How do you manage all of this? You have 3 kids. What are their ages?
So the youngest is 14, so 3 boys. The youngest is 14. That's Michael. Then Raphael is 19, and Aaron is 21.
Okay, so how do you manage all of this? It seems a little, there's just a lot. You've been very, not only professionally successful in many different ways, but, to get through life, to get to the other side, it's
I didn't start having children until I was 34. Okay. That was not necessarily, how it was all planned, but, you need to find a good partner. And I think that my husband, David, was and continues to be super important into my life and into our family life. And the support I've had from him, I think, has been really, really important.
So is he an academic as well? I know that's very common in our profession.
Well, he's not an academic, although he did do doctoral studies, but he decided on a different path. So when I met him, he was a diplomat.
Oh, wow.
And now he works for an organization representing financial institutions in the city in London.
Oh, wow. So this is you've had a whirlwind of a life in terms of living in different places. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of living in multiple countries? Because that seems to be somewhat of a common thing that we have to go through as academics, is moving.
Right. So when I on the two occasions, the 2 periods of time I lived in the United States, I was a student, so a master's student at Stanford and a doctoral student at MIT. And these are very structured and welcoming experiences, because U.S. universities such as those are very used to have very large influx of foreign students. So you meet other students just like yourself who also are coming from different countries, and you make connections with them in a very natural way. So so I'm sure I benefited from that, and I still have a very strong friendships from those years. Moving to a country when you are a young parent and a junior faculty in a country where you don't have family is a different and more challenging experience, precisely because you have to manage all these different responsibilities without having a built-in support network.
Yeah.
So more challenges, but we made it in the end.
Well, that was our experience as well. So I had.
You're from Canada, David?
Yes, I'm Canadian, and we had our 2 boys. I was just finishing up graduate school, and so my youngest one, I remember the trip, like it's burnt in my mind, because we were driving across the country. We had 2 dogs, a cat, and 2 boys under the age of 3 that were in the CRV, and we're up piled high. It was like all this luggage that was on there, and driving across the country to get.
Gosh, I can picture it.
Oh my gosh, it was quite the journey, and I completely understand in terms of feeling that you trying to build the support. And I think, at least in our family, it's been my wife is. We've sort of grown closer together in sort of tackling this larger problem of how do you manage this, right, without the support.
And the support of the institution you work with can be so critical as well. And I think many universities are doing better than they used to at supporting young parents, supporting mothers in particular. And I think that's really important, not to lose the talent, and to allow people in different stages of life to contribute to our academic community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a vitally important thing, and I think we need to. I believe we need to make an even stronger shift across the board in terms of realizing some of these demands, particularly as single parents and all of folks that are going through sort of challenges. It's not necessarily the challenging thing, as it's not necessarily any particular institution. It's sort of the college in general, right? The academic system in terms of how it's set up, and that is very difficult to manage families when you're going for tenure, and going through all of that process, dealing with it. How do you how have you been able to deal with this? And if you can give some thoughts on this, because you're actually so it's interesting, is you are in a particular domain that I would say there's probably a lot more men. Like digital economy is very much a topic that men gravitate towards. And so how are you able to make an influence and really change the dynamic as somebody that's managing this very busy career yourself?
It probably started because I started my career as an engineer.
Okay.
So my first studies, and that was in France, were in mathematics and physics. Then I have a degree in engineering from École des Mines of Nancy in France. And then my Stanford degree was also in engineering, although it was more of a bridge between technology and business already, being in industrial engineering.
Yeah.
So I think my early studies, as well as my first professional experience, which was working as an engineer in a very large technologically oriented corporation, allowed me to speak that language and understand that language, so both in terms of skills and in terms of not being intimidated by the technology. I think that was very influential in my way of looking at what kind of problems I could look at and understand them, and perhaps translate the dynamics of what I was seeing in other languages, or professional languages, management language, economics language. So I think that moving from one domain, which was a more technological domain, to another, which was more the social science, allowed me to perceive the kind of problems which I thought were important, and to have the confidence to speak to the people within those organizations. And this can go to detail such as not being afraid of saying, I don't understand, can you explain that? Because you have the confidence that you're going to understand it eventually. So I think all those factors helped me identify some dynamics which were happening in the beginning of the explosion of the internet, and how that was going to change innovation, make it more fragmented and more diversified. Yeah, so I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Math
So what
also helped with the economics. So I was able to learn a lot of economics, which, as you know, relies a lot on mathematics. But then my curiosity also led me to read much more broadly, and to be trained in more qualitative methods, which I ended up using a lot more, and read much more broadly.
So why qualitative? You're very strongly trained in quantitative methods, and you're studying platforms, which is nothing but computer scientists working on. So maybe if you could give a brief overview, what do you mean by a platform for those folks that are following along?
I mean, the word platforms is used in many ways, and sometimes if people talk about a platform, they mean a technological architecture, or they're going to mean a platform as a company, or they're going to mean a platform as a business model, or you even hear people talk about platform markets. So I think I welcome very much your question about how to be more specific about what we mean. I mean, when I use the term platform, I use it more as a modification to, is it a platform firm, or a platform business model, or a platform technology? Or I like to think of platform organizations as organizations that create value in a specific way. And I've identified, two main ways in which platforms create value. One is by facilitating exchanges, so kind of like a marketplace. So you can think of, I call them transaction platforms.
So do you have examples?
Like an Amazon marketplace, facilitating transaction between Amazon third-party sellers and end users, or Etsy, or Airbnb, or it could be Uber with the car, drivers, as well as people who want to be driven. So these are what I would call transaction platforms. And there's another way in which platform organizations can create value that has to do with what I call innovation platforms. And here, a platform is a technological building block on top of which third parties can build complementary innovations. So here, an example would be the Apple iOS. And then you would have lots of companies, the app developers, building apps on top of this platform.
But why is that important? So this is the challenging thing, is why are we so concerned about platforms today?
Because of the digital economy. So if you think of the digital economy as an economy where many objects are connected to each other. So you can have, machine to machines, also organizations are connected to each other, and human beings are connected to each other. So there is this pervasive connectivity, like a layer of connectivity on top of the world as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you have a more accessible capacity to process data. So data that is being generated on a continuous basis and captured on a continuous basis. So these two technological factors, the connectivity and the capacity to process data, make it easier to identify complementarities. So it's become easier, cheaper, feasible to identify buyer or identify sellers, or to facilitate the identification, the connection, the exchange between entities that could not have known each other, could not have identified each other, and could not have exchanged with each other. So that's for the transaction part. And for the innovation part, you have also a phenomenon which is standardization of software development. So anywhere in the world, people use very similar and compatible tools to build software. And so when you have technological systems that have at their core, say, an operating system like iOS, which is a very powerful operating system that has a point of connection, if you wish, interfaces that are open and onto which external third parties can add their piece of software built independently. You can have then a system that can.
Let's get back to the idea of platforms and why study them today. Why is everybody so concerned about that at this moment? I was thinking about that as you were explaining what platforms are, and there seems to be a lot of discussion in popular press. And I don't know if you want to speak to why should we be paying attention to them?
Well, we're paying attention to them because a small number of digital platform firms have become extremely powerful in terms of their financial resources, as well as the impact they have on hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, of users, be they individual users and business users. So out of the top 10 companies in terms of market cap in 2024, 6 out of 10 are platform companies operating platform businesses. So that in and of itself is a relatively new phenomenon, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people are looking at those platforms and at their behavior. In particular, because platforms connect multiple companies to each other and multiple users to each other, and they some of the most powerful platforms play a role of so-called gatekeeper. That is, they can decide unilaterally whether or not to allow some constituencies to connect to their platform. And so the platform ecosystem, which is the constellation of actors that are connected to the platform, they become economies in and on their own. Mm-hmm. And these economies are sometimes, larger than countries. And so the platform owner becomes really a governor, a private governor of an entire economy that spans across multiple legal jurisdictions, multiple geographies. When you see that regions such as the EU has deployed an ambassador to Silicon Valley, so treating as a nation almost the decision makers that operate those economies. These are some of the reasons why platforms have been and continue to fascinate and be the subject of scrutiny and sometimes very hot and contested debate.
But why should social scientists study this, right? Isn't this mostly for computer scientists? Don't people who own these platforms, aren't they going to work in the best interests of all of us?
what we know from social science is that you know, we know that companies don't always work in the best interest of everyone, right? They work in their own private interest. And then we have theories that say that if everybody works in their own private interest and competition plays its role, then eventually everybody's better off, right?
Mhm.
That alone can be a contested theory, but at least that's been a prevalent theory in classical economics, for example. What we see with digital platforms is that the functioning of the markets in which they operate doesn't lead naturally to perfectly well-functioning markets. We see that there are phenomena of economists call them network effects. So these are positive feedback loop, momentum loop that accrue further value for new users to connecting to a platform that already has a lot of members. So under some circumstances, you can even get to positions of monopolists. And these monopoly positions, once a company gets into a monopoly position, they have both the incentive and the capacity to prevent further competition to come and dethrone them.
Hmm.
So what we see is companies that start as entrepreneurs trying to be successful, and some of them being more successful than others. But you cannot survive as a platform if you don't get to a position of centrality, and that centrality can become dominance. And then what do you do as a firm when you have achieved that position of dominance? When you don't really have the discipline of the market to maintain you in a way to always have to put customers' interests at the forefront.
So I've the whole reason why I started this whole reciprocity project was I thought I could build a platform, and it started out as this sort of dream of when I was driving home with my kids in the car, and I was sort of daydreaming from Disney. We live pretty close to Disney, and I thought, hey, couldn't I build a platform that would help out researchers and make it so that it motivates us, makes us feel good whenever we do research, because as you know, it's a grind. It's hard sitting down and doing these things, and have tools that allows us to do things that we probably wouldn't do in of ourselves. And I was sort of modeling after the sharing economy at the time. And I worry about that a lot, of how does one manage something like that? First of all, it's a struggle of building the getting those economies, right? It's not as obvious as one would think. I thought it would be a lot easier, but it's not as obvious of getting lots of people to sort of join and participate. And then I worry about, at some point, how do you prevent something like this is getting out of control? It's something I actually honestly think about. If I don't want to be in a position where it's so, and it's not there yet. It's not even close to there. But I worry about the sort of governance of it. How do you deal with this?
I mean, there are obviously different types of platforms. Some of them, facilitate buying and selling. Some of them facilitate, renting a house or flat. Some of them facilitate, mobility, and some of them are more akin to social networks and social media. So it looks to me that what you had in mind of building was something. I mean, what I understand about what you've been doing so far is only, I'm sure, just a small part of it, is to build a channel.
No, actually, it was to build to be honest, it was building a platform, like a technical platform. This is how it worked out. So I couldn't get a team together to do it here. So then I got a contract developer to build this platform, and it was envisioned to be like essentially like Uber, but for writing and for doing research papers. And so I started going on and building this thing out, but then I had to figure out a way to market it. And then, the channel in of itself was a way of communicating to other people what was going on. And it seems like the channel is the thing that's actually more taking off than the platform itself. Which is
We
really
see that a lot. I mean, companies start somewhere and, they pivot and they become something else, right? Because,
yeah,
you're exploring some idea, some dream you had, you don't know if there is much demand for what you do. You don't know how much it's going to cost or how feasible it's going to be to build it. And then you stumble upon something that actually resonates.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. But I still, my dream is to build this platform where the sort of the one that helps us write to motivate, particularly graduate students. Myself, there's many days that I don't feel like writing, and having tools at your fingertips of how to actually do this, where it's fun, it's goofy, it's silly. That's an important dream for me, and it sort of motivates me to do all this other stuff. How do you how would you go about doing this if you were me and all of this research at this point? You're a lot more
So you
knowledgeable.
want to build a platform that helps people write research articles? Is that what you
Yeah,
want to do?
yeah,
You really
exactly.
need a platform to do that. It sounds more like a tool, a writing tool, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why did it? I mean, the notion of platform is either you bring together people
That's
that
exactly it.
so you wanted to bring co-authors together.
So the idea was that so there's this idea of citizen science. So how I was thinking about it when I was going through high school, and sometimes in college, my mom would help me out. Now she didn't finish. She finished high school very late in life, in her 50s, and there's all these pockets of people all around the world that would participate in science if they had access to. So I wanted to make it democratize a lot of the research game of what we're doing and open it out so that people from all around the world can participate and give feedback on articles or the process of building an article. But at the same time, obviously, not everybody is sort of skilled in the research game. That's why you go to do a PhD. So then you need tools like machines, algorithms, those kind of things that help out with this feedback. And so it's this combination of using feedback from other people to give sort of raw insight into ideas, but then as well as a sort of motivational part of it, that as you interact with it, it becomes more fun and gives you feedback along the way.
And so why do you think so far it hasn't quite taken off?
So this is the challenge, right? I've been struggling with it, obviously. So one of the problems is the chicken and the egg problem, right? It's hard to get it going because it's pretty raw at this moment. It's not like a perfect product.
You really should read our book, The Business of Platforms.
I did actually. I just put it online. I did the self-publishing thing. I tried to get a publisher, but it was very hard to get a publisher. So it's just online right now, and it's about the story of how to build this thing, and the challenges that you face. And it is harder than you think it is. And the reason is that in order to get funding and to get other people, it's more of a getting people to believe in it, right? So right now, I have to sole fund it because you have to get it to a point where people can believe in it, and then once you get people to believe in it, then other investors will come into it in the past. And it's from an academic entrepreneurship side of things, it's actually been relatively difficult because it's a commercial enterprise. And I didn't intend it to be that way. It's just that that's the way that it would fit within the current framework. It has to be sort of a commercial enterprise that's standalone from the university, because of intellectual property issues. But then it's hard to put a team together to build this thing, and so I have to cobble together what I can. And so that's why you see me online, is that's the only way that I know how to to talk about this, to get the word out, and to find interesting people like you to talk to, right? Like, it's so hard to cobble these things together to actually make something to work.
You might find that in the book that we wrote with Mike Cusumano and David Yoffie called The Business of Platforms, that there's a very simple framework of a four-step model where you might just find that helpful as you go through your own entrepreneur journey to see, maybe I missed that, or maybe I hadn't thought quite enough about this.
And what are those 4 steps? I remember I did read a couple of chapters in that book.
So the first step would be to identify what we call the sides of your platform. So who are those constituencies that you imagine would benefit from it? And try to be very clear as to what they would benefit from it should the platform exist. And are there network effects across the side? That is this a situation where indeed if you have more people on one side, that creates demand from more people on the other side? And so you need to look at the incentives for people or organizations to join in this new platform that you have. And the platform has to offer different kind of value to the different sides. So that's the first step.
So that's clearly part of it, but I also have a bit of a different take on it now of doing it. And it wasn't only when it actually people started paying attention to particularly this channel was when I started being more honest and more real and authentic, and moving away from some of the sort of notions of incentives and sort of thinking about A/B testing, and going towards how do you make it feel like you want to participate. And that's a little different than I think the sort of incentive framework, where it's really thinking about, and on top of it, it's being, so the book that I wrote, I called it the bumbling fool theory of creating something from nothing, because you feel like I don't know what to do most of the time, right? And I think it's very, just that honesty is an important part of it. Do you have thoughts in terms of how do you keep working in a particular area for a long time? This is one of the things that I think new students, even assistant professors, really struggle with is realizing that you do have to focus on a particular area.
Right.
So what keeps bringing you back?
Well, the phenomenon that I'm studying is evolving itself. So it keeps me interested because it's never the same. So there are some commonalities across time, but I see it evolve. So that's one thing. Choose a phenomenon or a question that is likely to be interesting over a long time because a lot of other people are interested in it. I also balance my academic work with companies as a coach or a consultant, and so that keeps my interest going because I see the way different facets of these problems are relevant to people outside academia.
So those are 2 fascinating things. So first of all, you're probably one of the first people that started studying platforms, or particularly in strategy, right? So yeah. How did you get into that? So let me take that. It probably felt strange. It probably felt like you were doing the wrong thing. Particularly at the time, a lot of people were interested in another theory, resource-based view and transaction economics. And then
but remember, I didn't come to academia immediately from undergraduate. So I came from academia after having worked in companies for around 4 years. So what nourished my interest to go into academia was to understand what was happening in the world of companies and the economy and organizations. So I wasn't driven by theoretical interest at first. I was more interest. I was looking for theories to help me explicate messy, complicated things that happen in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was pretty open-minded in terms of theories, and I read voraciously across disciplines. So not every career path in academia follows that. Some people are very wedded to a particular stream of literature, which defines their identity and who they connect with and who they read and who they cite. And I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But when you're looking at a phenomenon that doesn't quite neatly fit into any existing literature, it helps to be more curious and not to be wedded ex ante to a particular stream of theory. So yeah, it was a bit of a risky path to undertake. I don't think I was quite aware of how risky it was at the time. I think I was more driven by my curiosity and encouraged by my supervisors, and a bit naive perhaps about the way academia operates.
Mm-hmm.
So then it took quite a while for me to actually be able to publish in the best journals, because the field itself of platform research, especially in strategy, took a while to grow. So it was a challenge to find, reviewers, or to find editors that would understand that the topic is important and relevant. So I ended up doing some institution building activities, such as creating the first conference on platforms, which was in 2008 at Imperial College, where I invited people from various disciplines and edited a book called Platforms, Markets, and Innovation, which was probably one of the first edited book on the topic, bringing people from economics and marketing and strategy and innovation, knowledge management around platforms and facilitating these conversations. Others have then picked up, for example, Marshall Van Alstyne and Jeff Parker, organizing every year at Boston University a yearly platform research symposium. But you have also seen over time, keywords like platforms and ecosystems coming into the topics that you see in major journals or at the Academy of Management or SMS. You see an increasing number of sessions on these topics. But it took a lot of patience in the early years.
So, but can I say something? I think it's absolutely courageous, and it is amazing to see somebody just be passionate about something. And you said this several times, curiosity. I think it's such an incredible part of telling your career, is where you are just curious.
Yeah.
And it often doesn't necessarily matter what other people think about that curiosity.
It matters eventually.
I mean, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the curiosity, I think, is a telltale, sign. I mean, even when we are, as researchers, we want to be at the forefront of something. We want to help discover or explain or identify things that others haven't quite seen that way or understood that way. And so, by definition, by design, our professional activity isn't one where we're surrounded by people who clap along as we are going forward, right? By definition, it's not like the Tour de France, By definition, there is this moment which you alluded to yourself, David, of loneliness, right? And so, what keeps you going? What gives you the confidence to think you're not lost? And for me, over the years, I've developed a sense of, that little spark you feel, which is, that's interesting, that energizes me, that is something I didn't understand. And to have the confidence to realize that if that's interesting to you, that will probably become interesting to other people. You might sometimes have to find words to explain to others why they should care. But if there's something generally interesting to you, there is a reason for it. So the work is to explain even to yourself what exactly about this gets you going, what exactly about this gets your interest, vibrating, and dig there.
What is that though? What is that? Because I see it when you're talking about platforms, which, I was to talk to my mom about platforms. She was so born senseless. But when you're talking about it, you have this twinkle in your eye. How do you get that?
That I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I think you have to be aware of what makes you interested. I mean, what things get you going are probably different than mine, right? So one has to be self-aware. It's a self-awareness. There are things that are more interesting to us, and we have to dig there. For me, platforms have always been very interesting because I saw them, especially in the early days, as a way to combine public interest and private interest. I saw the structure of platforms as a way to where you would have a private company that would invest and develop a particular technology and then open it up to the world, and then that would be creating a business reasons for others to innovate in a way that would be complementary. And so I was very interested in what, in particular, Intel was doing in the early years of my thesis. That was what my thesis was on. Intel was able to develop every couple of years new and twice as powerful microprocessor. And they became so good at building this ever faster microprocessor that they ended up being in a situation where they were faster than everybody else. The microprocessor had to be one piece in a larger puzzle, which was the computer. But the other pieces of the puzzle weren't fast enough to make the extra performance of the microprocessor visible to the end users. So they ended up realizing that they were innovating ahead of the pack, so to speak, and that they had to influence the other members of their ecosystem, that is the other developers of hardware and software that were compatible with their piece, to be able to take advantage of the extra speed and extra processing capabilities they brought. So they thought very hard in a systemic manner at how to change the architecture of the system within which they were a part of. And they ended up having an influence over those through a variety of initiatives, some of them having to do with giving some technology away, especially around the connectors, some of them having to do with developing this whole concept of developers forums, which now has become ubiquitous. And so I was really interested in how a private company, for their own private interest, ended up doing something that was good for a collective of organizations. That's what got me really interested. And then I just followed the evolution of this system, of this economic, technological, and social system, to get to the point where we are now, where it's a bit ironic to see that we are now in a situation where actually, yes, value is created in a very distributed and fragmented way, but the value is being captured in an extremely concentrated way. And so what started off at triggering my interest as a way to, in a sort of virtuous cycle, private and public interest would help each other. I worry that now we are in a situation where that situation is quite imbalanced. And so I think that it's important for many people to understand, there's no baked-in evil into all of this, but there are very strong, economic and social forces that are creating a situation that now is calling for a bit of a corrective, probably in the shape of some kind of government regulation, which itself is no panacea, could create other problems. But how can I not be interested in all that? It's fascinating stuff.
So I'm listening to what you're saying. It's super fascinating. At any point in your career, did you feel like you were doing the right thing? Did it feel like this is the right answer, or was it curiosity that was driving you? Something that was ultimately very irrational, where you pursue and you work at something for such a long time that nobody else understands.
Well, I don't think I could have kept going much further if there hadn't been at some point, I think about 10 years after I graduated, a really massive pickup of the topic in terms of community interest, colleagues recognition, so I think that, you can go the distance for a long time, carried on by your own interest and the small community of people who you work with, and especially if you esteem them, that's a reinforcement. But in terms of it's like you build a product, and at some point there needs to be some demand, right?
So I'm going to push back. I think part of the reason why lots of people are interested in platforms are because of people like you and your twinkle in your eye that you see, and that your curiosity, and then it's such a powerful thing to listen to you, that you just have some love about this abstract thing. And by the way, like, it's all abstract, right? Like, there's nothing that you can really put your fingers on. And you're doing something that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense when you examine it. And it's because you are so passionate and you're so excited about this particular topic that everybody else gets excited. And all of a sudden you get these sort of feely things that are going out, and people are like, oh, have you talked to Annabelle? Isn't that an amazing thing that she's working on? I think that there's some of that that's going on. I truly believe that.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing what you say. I don't know if that's true, but that's an interesting
No, I do think, I mean, and it's not just you, right? Like, I think that there's many people that are looking at this and saying, that's weird. That's really, really strange.
Okay.
Why does that happen? And I think you're probably being a little modest, is what I'm saying. I think what you're doing is really important, to pursue things that are interesting and that don't quite make sense to a lot of people, particularly at the beginning.
Yeah.
And to continue with those things.
Right. I think what's also helpful is to connect meaningfully with various other individuals, other researchers in other communities. And I think that's something that I've spent a lot of time doing, which is, contrary to many colleagues who, as I said, tend to publish in one stream of literature, I wrote and co-authored and published articles in, applied economics, strategy, innovation, organization studies. I recently had a paper in Business Ethics Quarterly, information systems. So I think I do have a curiosity, not just about the phenomenon, but how it connects to various communities and different facets of it. And there's something about my personality or my history that facilitates, and that I enjoy about this bridging across silos, or bridging across communities. And I'm sure that has been helpful and instrumental, because I get to a point in my career where people come to me, even if I don't know them, and they say, look, I think there's an interesting paper to write about this. What do you think about that? And these are wonderful opportunities to learn and to sometimes help younger colleagues. And so.
But you're brave. I mean, that's a lot of people, I think what it comes down to is that you're very brave, and that you're going into these areas that traditionally a lot of people are pretty scared about, right? It seems like a risky thing, and I don't know, maybe it's, the way I look at it is, maybe it's not brave. Maybe it's just like this part of your brain that's, this is not functioning compared to everybody else, but you're doing things that are changing the direction of how people view this. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And that's
Thank you so much, David.
It is.
I'm kind of you, and I appreciate very much what you say. I really do.
Because it's non-traditional. And despite the fact, so there's this incongruency that happens, right? As you know, the institutional folks, the governments, all those kind of folks, they want all of this interdisciplinary stuff. But when you're in it, in doing the practice, it's almost frowned upon. And I would say probably it is frowned upon.
Yeah.
And so you are bridging this and actually figuring out a way to do it and to do it fairly well.
Thank you. I don't necessarily recommend that to junior folks. That I realize just how time-consuming it is, and
What do
but I
you
love to
recommend?
learn new things, and I know it is tremendously time-consuming to learn about a new literature and to understand it enough to understand what's considered an interesting question there, what's considered a valid methodology, what's considered a relevant response, and co-authorship really helps.
What? So you said you wouldn't recommend it to junior folks.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend. I mean, I think I was perhaps taking more risks than I realized earlier in my career, and actually, I'm fundamentally very risk-averse kind of person. So what you think is brave is probably a bit foolish on my part.
Yeah, absolutely. A
combination of foolishness and informed, a bit of luck. But persistence for sure.
Yeah, so, but exactly. But also on top of that, I think if we all did what we were told in what was the best way, this is my own view, we probably wouldn't have a lot of interesting things to say.
I agree.
And it's it's the adversity, it's the struggle that actually does matter.
I agree.
And there's something about that is very, very important.
I agree. And I think it's very important to maintain this curiosity and this desire to try new things in our young, doctoral students and assistant professors. And I know I'm not the first one or the only one to say so, but we need to be really careful about our own evaluation and promotion systems, where very early on, we only consider people who have succeeded in the system as it currently is. And if I had been evaluated today with the output that I had in the first 2 or 3 years of my career, I wouldn't be where I am. The system's becoming very punishing. So we need to be careful to preserve an environment where colleagues can explore areas without the quick validation of a journal paper.
But also in areas that people just don't understand, right? Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes to do these things, and they're often the things that are the most interesting. I was interested in this. Do you know Novo Nordisk with the Ozempic medication that they came up with, diabetes medication? It was completely accident, right? And this is probably going to be one of the most important medications that we have of all time.
Right.
So we have to be careful with applying very rational, checklisty kind of stuff to things that just often don't make sense to us, right? We have to have a lot more curiosity and be open to some of those things. But on the other side, I mean, I agree that it is difficult to assess people at an early stage.
Yeah.
But to me, it seems curious, and that's the word I'm going to say, is curious, that we assess people based on very small numbers.
That's true. That's very true.
Very true.
Do you have any final thoughts in terms of...
Well, I just want to say this was a very interesting and freewheeling conversation where we touched upon a number of topics. So thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to reflect on one's path and try to extract some lessons. And I just think the spirit in which you want this channel to grow and your endeavor to grow is very inclusive and caring about the well-being of our colleagues who are trying to make their way in this profession. So I'm very happy to support that, and just thank you for the work you're doing there.
Thank you. I do appreciate you hearing you say that. In particular, I just really want you to know that even though sometimes your work may not be central to some of the fields, it's very important. And it becomes central over time because of your curiosity that I clearly see. You're excited about this particular domain. So it's nice to get to know people that are doing things that are just curious for the sake of curiosity. And I think that's the true academic in you.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care. Bye.